The morning started like every other, quiet, predictable, forgettable. Steam curled lazily from my cup of tea, and the word felt small enough to hold in my hands. If anyone had told me that a single careless sentence would change everything, I would have laughed. I was standing in line at the palace courtyard, just another citizen among dozens, waiting to catch a glimpse of her, the queen. The woman people spoke about in hushed, reverent tones. To me, she was just a distant figure, a symbol more than a person. The crowd buzzed with admiration. She's flawless. Oh, she's divine. She's everything we're not. I shifted my weight, half listening, half lost in my own thoughts. And then, without even realizing it, I mutter under my breath, "Funny how people worship her like that. She probably wakes up tired and human like the rest of us." It wasn't loud. It wasn't meant to be heard, but the moment the words left my lips, the air changed, a silence, heavy, sudden and natural. My stomach dropped, and then I heard it. A soft voice, right behind me. "Do you really think so?" My heart stopped. Slowly, too slowly, I turned around, and there she was. Not on a balcony, not behind guards, not distant and untouchable. Standing right behind me, the queen. Up close. She wasn't glowing or divine. She wasn't larger than life. She was real. Her eyes met mine, not with anger, not with pride, but with something far more terrifying in that moment, curiosity. Every possible consequence crashed into my mind at once. I'm done. I've insulted her. I'm going to be punished or worse. My throat tightened. Words refused to come out. I could feel every eye in the courtyard drilling into me. "I didn't mean, Your Majesty. I stumbled over myself, my voice shaking, heat rising to my face. But she didn't interrupt. She just watched me calmly. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. Not the practiced smile of a ruler, a real one. "You know, right?" she said gently. I blinked. "What?" She stepped closer, not intimidating, not commanding, just human. "I do wake up tired," she continued. "Some days I doubt myself. Some days I wish I could disappear into a crowd like this and not be seen at all. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. The crowd was just as stunned as I was." She glanced around at the people, then back at me. "People see crowns and titles," she said softly, "but they forget the person underneath. And sometimes we forget too." Her gaze held mine, not as a queen to a subject, but as one person to another. "Honesty like yours, it's rare and necessary. My fear didn't vanish, but it shifted, it softened into something else. Understanding." She stepped back, her presence no longer suffocating, but grounding. "Just be careful where you say it next time," she added with a faint, amused glint in her eyes. A quiet ripple louder moved through the crowd. And just like that, the tension dissolved. She turned and walked away, the moment slipping through my fingers as quickly as it had come. But I stood there, frozen, my heart still racing, not from fear anymore, but from something deeper, because for the first time the queen hadn't felt like a distant figure on a pedestal. She had felt like us. And as I picked up my now cold cup of tea, one thought lingered louder than anything else. Sometimes the most powerful people aren't the ones who demand silency, but the ones who are brave enough to listen. The day began like any other, too early, slightly rushed, and wrapped in the quiet comfort of routine. I was at my usual spot in the corner of a small cafe, fingers curled around a chipped ceramic mug, watching the world pass by through a foggy window. The barista was half asleep, the same old song played faintly in the background, and nothing about the morning suggested it would be anything more than ordinary. I liked it that way. No surprises, no drama. Just me, my tea, and a few scattered thoughts I never said out loud. But that morning the cafe was busier than usual. There was a low hum of excitement in the air, something I couldn't quite place at first. People whispered more than they talked, and every now and then someone would glance toward the entrance like they were waiting for something or someone. I ignored it. I had my own thoughts to deal with. Then I heard it, a conversation from the table beside me. "She's coming here, can you believe it?" I heard, "She's even more stunning in person." They say she's graceful, powerful, almost unreal. I didn't need to ask who they were talking about. Everyone knew. The queen, the woman people adored, admired, practically worshipped. Her image was everywhere. Perfect posture, perfect smile, perfect life. I stared down into my cup, watching the steam swirl and disappear, and before I even realized I was speaking, the words slipped out. Funny how people talk about her like she's not even human. I muttered, just loud enough for myself, like she doesn't get tired or frustrated or just want to be left alone sometimes. It felt like a harmless thought, an honest one, the kind of thing you say when you forget the world might actually hear you. And then silence, not gradual, not subtle. Complete, the kind of silence that feels heavy, like the air itself has thickened. My fingers tightened around the mug. Something wasn't right. Then came a voice. Soft, calm, right behind me. And what makes you so sure she does? Every muscle in my body locked. No, 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 slowly, painfully slowly, I turned around, and there she was, closer than I ever imagined. No guards pushing people back, no distance separating her from the rest of us. Just there, standing behind me, close enough that I could see the smallest details, the slight crease near her eyes, the calm steadiness in her expression. The queen. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard it felt like it might give me away. I just said that out louder. My mind spiraled. That was disrespectful. That was stupid. Why would I say that here, of all places? What happens now? I didn't realize, Your Majesty, I wasn't. My voice tangled itself into knots, each word worse than the last. Heat flooded my face, and suddenly I couldn't meet her eyes. This was it. The moment where everything goes wrong because you forget your place. But she didn't speak immediately. That almost made it worse. The silence stretched just long enough for every possible consequence to play out in my head. Embarrassment. Regret. And then she exhaled softly. You think I don't get tired? She asked. I blinked, confused. That wasn't anger, that wasn't even cold, it sounded genuine. I hesitated, then nodded slightly, too nervous to trust my voice. For a moment she simply studied me, not like a ruler judging a mistake, but like someone trying to understand a thought. Then, to my complete shock, she smiled, not the distant practiced smile I'd seen in portraits. This one was smaller, warmer, real. I do, she said quietly, more often than people would like to believe. I looked up at her then, really looked, and for the first time she didn't seem untouchable. She seemed present, human. There are mornings I wish I could sit exactly where you are, she continued, glancing briefly at my table with nothing expected of me. No eyes watching, no image to maintain. The cafe remained silent, everyone holding their breath, caught in a moment none of us expected. I suppose it's easier, she added, for people to believe I'm something more than human. It makes the world feel more certain. Her gaze returned to me, steady but kind, but she didn't believe that. I swallowed, my embarrassment still burning, but now mixed with something else. Something quieter. I just think people are still people, I managed to say. Her smile deepened, just slightly. That's a dangerous kind of honesty, she said, but also a valuable one. There was no anger in her voice, no punishment waiting behind her words, just a quiet acknowledgement, like she had heard something true and rare. She straightened slightly, the weight of her role settling back onto her shoulders, but the warmth didn't disappear. Next time, she said, a faint hint of amusement in her tone. Perhaps be a little more careful where you say it. But a soft ripple of laughter moved through the room, breaking the tension at last. And just like that, the moment shifted, the fear loosened its grip. The world felt normal again, but not quite the same. She turned to leave, her presence moving with calm certainty. But before she stepped away completely, she paused. Honesty, she said without looking back, reminds us who we are beneath everything else. Then she was gone. The noise of the cafe slowly returned, conversations picking up like nothing extraordinary had happened. But I stayed there, staring at my now cold tea, my thoughts louder than ever. Because in a single accidental moment, the distance between ordinary and extraordinary had disappeared. And I realized something I wouldn't forget. The difference between us and those we place above us isn't nearly as gray as we imagine until we're brave enough to see it. My name is Ion, and that morning I remember feeling invisible, not in a dramatic, tragic way, just the quiet kind of invisibility that settles into your bones after too many ordinary days stacked on top of each other. I was sitting in my usual corner of a small cafe, the kind where nobody really notices you unless you stop showing up. My tea had already gone lukewarm, and I hadn't taken a sip in minutes. I was too busy watching the faint reflection of myself in the window, wondering, not for the first time, if this was all life was going to be. There's a certain weight that comes with routine. You wake up, you do what's expected, you move through the same streets, see the same faces, think the same thoughts, and somewhere in between all that repetition, you start to feel like you're fading to the background of your own life. That's where I was. Not unhappy exactly, just stuck, like I was waiting for something to happen, even though I had no idea what that something was. The cafe buzzed more than usual that day, but even that felt distant to me, like I was hearing it from underwater. People were whispering, leaning closer to each other, their voices carrying a kind of excitement I couldn't relate to. I caught fragments of conversation, something about a visit, about someone important, but it all drifted past me without landing. I didn't have the energy to care. Important people belong to important stories, and I wasn't part of anything like that. I rested my chin in my hand, staring at the slow curl of steam rising from my cup, watching it disappear into nothing. It felt strangely fitting. That's how my thoughts had been lately, appearing for a moment, then dissolving before they could mean anything. I wondered if anyone else felt like this, like they were living on pause while the rest of the world kept moving forward. A quiet sigh slipped out of me before I could stop it. I didn't even realize how heavy my chest felt until that moment. Maybe it was the sameness of everything. Maybe it was the feeling that no matter what I said or did, it wouldn't really matter. People like me didn't change things. We observed. We blended in. We kept our thoughts to ourselves because, honestly, who was listening anyway? That thought lingered longer than the others. Who was listening? I glanced around the cafe, at the people leaning in close, at the way their eyes occasionally flickered toward the door like they were waiting for something significant. For a brief second, I wondered what it must feel like to be the reason a room holds its breath, to be seen, truly seen. Not just as another face in the crowd, but as someone who mattered. Then I let the thought go almost instinctively. That kind of thinking felt dangerous, like wanting more than you were meant to have. So I leaned back in my chair, exhaled slowly, and returned to my quiet observation of the world, convinced that this day, like every other, would pass without anything noticing me at all. The cafe settled into a rhythm, so gentle it almost felt like time itself had slowed down. Cups clinked softly against saucers, a spoon stirred somewhere behind me in a steady, absent-minded circle, and the faint hum of conversation blended into something more like background music than actual voices. It was the kind of place where nothing urgent ever seemed to happen, where moments stretched just a little longer than they did outside, as if the world had agreed to take a breath and linger. I sat there, shoulders slightly hunched, letting that calm wrap around me like a familiar blanket. The chair beneath me creaked faintly whenever I shifted, a small, predictable sound that grounded me in the moment. My tea had cooled enough to drink now, but I still hadn't touched it. Instead, I traced the rim of the cup with my finger, feeling the slight imperfections in the ceramic, tiny ridges and uneven edges that made it feel real, handcrafted, human. Somehow, that detail mattered more to me than anything else happening in the room. Outside, the street moved at its usual pace. People passed by in no particular hurry, their footsteps muted by the glass between us. A cyclist rolled past, the soft whir of the wheels barely audible. Somewhere in the distance, a vendor called out, his voice stretched thin by the air before it faded complete. It was all so ordinary, so unremarkable that it became comforting. There was no pressure here. no expectations, just the quiet existence of a moment that didn't demand anything from me. I leaned back slightly, exhaling through my nose, and for a second I let my eyes close. The warmth of the cafe, the low hum of life around me, it all blurred into a kind of peaceful stillness. My thoughts, which usually raced from one worry to another, seemed to slow down too, like they were following the same unspoken rule as everything else in the room. Nothing needed to be rushed. Even the people around me seemed softer somehow. Conversation stayed low, almost respectful, as if no one wanted to disturb the fragile calm. A couple near the window shared a quiet laugh, their voices barely rising above a whisper. Someone turned a page in a newspaper, the sound crisp but not intrusive. Behind the counter, the barista moved with practiced ease. No sudden motions, no clatter, just a smooth, continuous flow of small actions repeated countless times before. It felt like the kind of moment that would slip away unnoticed if you weren't paying attention. The kind of moment you'd forget by the end of the day, replaced by louder, more urgent memories. But sitting there, I became aware of how rare that kind of stillness actually was. There was something fragile about it, like it could break if anything unexpected pushed too hard against it. I opened my eyes again and looked around, taking it in more deliberately this time. The soft light filtering through the window, the faint reflection of movement on the glass, the quiet rise and fall of voices. It all felt carefully balanced, like a scene set exactly the way it was meant to be. Nothing unusual, nothing dramatic. Just a simple, peaceful moment suspended in time. And yet, without knowing why, I had the faintest sense that it wouldn't last. The calm wrapped around me so completely that I stopped filtering my thoughts. That was the danger of quiet moments like this. They loosen the grip you had on yourself. With no urgency, no pressure, your mind wandered wherever it pleased, and sometimes it didn't bother keeping things inside. I watched the people around me more closely now, noticing how their energy had shifted from calm to quietly excited. Their voices, though still hushed, carried a kind of reverence that felt out of place in a simple cafe. Every few seconds someone would glance toward the door again, as if expecting it to open and reveal something extraordinary. I followed their gaze once, then looked away. Important people, important moments, they had nothing to do with me. Still, the whispers continued to drift toward me, impossible to ignore completely. They say she's even more graceful in person. I heard she never loses composure, no matter what. She's perfect, truly perfect. Perfect. The word lingered in my mind longer than it should have. I stared down my cup again, watching the faint ripple of the tea as my fingers nudged it slightly. Perfect. It was such a strange thing to believe about someone. No one I had ever known was perfect, not even close. People were messy, unpredictable, full of contradictions. That's what made them real. And yet here they were talking about her like she was something else entirely. Something above all that. I leaned back in my chair, the wood creaking softly beneath me, and let out a slow breath through my nose. My thoughts, once quiet, began to take shape more clearly now, forming words before I could stop them. It wasn't frustration exactly, more like a quiet disbelief. Without lifting my gaze, without checking who might be listening, I spoke. Barely above a murmur, the kind of voice you use when you think the world isn't paying attention. Funny how people need someone to seem perfect, I said almost to myself, like it makes them feel better about everything else. The words felt heavier once they were out, but I didn't stop. I should have, but I didn't. I gave a small, almost tired shake of my head, a faint, humorless smile touching my lips as another thought slipped free. She probably wakes up exhausted like everyone else, I added quietly. Maybe even more, but no one wants to see that. It would ruin the illusion. My fingers stilled against the cup. For a moment nothing happened, no reaction, no interruption. Just the same soft hum of the cafe continuing around me, unchanged, and that's what made me let my guard down even further. I exhaled, leaning forward slightly now, resting my elbows on the table as my voice dropped even lower, more honest than I usually allowed it to be. It's strange, I continued, almost thoughtful now. We put people so high up that we forget they're human. and then we expect them to live up to something that doesn't even exist. There was no bitterness in my tone. No anger, just a quiet certainty, like I was stating something obvious that no one else seemed to notice. I wasn't trying to challenge anyone. I wasn't trying to be bold. If anything, I had forgotten where I was entirely. To me, it was just another passing thought, one of many that would usually stay locked in my head, unheard and unnoticed. But this time I had let it slip, and in the stillness that followed there was a faintest shift in the air, so subtle that, at first, I didn't even recognize it for what it was, as if the moment I spoke something somewhere had begun to change.